It's Tucker here, and today I'm going to do a video talking all about the new slam skills and Warcries, and you'll have some footage of some slams and some explosions in the background. So before we go into analysing each ability in practice, I wanted to just quickly talk through some of the information we've had on the new and reworked abilities. So Earth Shatter, I'm actually pretty disappointed about Earth Shatter, but we'll get back to that in a second. But the main important thing about it is it's a level 12 slam ability. So it's something you could use while you level until you wait to get into like Ice Crash or Earthquake, or I can't remember. I want to say Tectonic Slam is level 28 skill as well, but yeah, I think it might be just like a skill you use early on. To me, at least, it didn't seem too impressive. Maybe with Helm enchants, it could become a bit better. But anyway, so how does it actually function? So you send out 5 damaging fissures in all directions when you slam the ground. At the end of each fissure, a spike bursts forth and remains for a short time. If these spikes are in the same area of another, so it doesn't trigger off itself, you need to use another slam or Warcry, the spikes explode. Which you can see, that's what's happening here. So he does slam, slam, Warcry. I don't know, it seems to clear worse than just a Perforate and Sandstorm. And then it seems just clunkier and more delayed than Earthquake. Like, if you want delayed big damage, you could just use Earthquake, and Earthquake is a much smoother playstyle. And, yeah, I don't know. For a 1-2 ability, the payoff doesn't seem big enough. The caveat to that, though, is it could be really good. If the enchant gives like additional explosions or additional lines, that could be good. And it could maybe have some synergy with one of the new Warcries, but we'll get into that later. So that's Earth Shatter. For now, personally, I'm not too impressed. You could also use it to maybe like prelay a bunch of damage on a boss. But I don't think you'll need to do that, because generally these builds have a lot of damage, and their main issues was like clear. So I don't think you'll be struggling for damage with these builds. Tectonic. I still am not that impressed by Tectonic. I've never been that happy with the Tectonic. It now no longer consumes endurance charges. Now the way it works is every 3rd hit, it will consume a charge and you'll get a bigger one. So instead of just being like random consumption, it's every 3rd you get the big one, it'll use up a charge. Which I prefer. It makes the skill feel more plannable. You can like have synergy with stuff like Ruthless or something. So when you do get that big 3rd hit, you could have like Tectonic, Ruthless, and Fist of War, which are all like on 3. So every 3rd hit, you just get this like massive supercharge. Could be fun if you like having that kind of a playstyle. If you just want to play a fire-based slam ability using, again, one of the new Warcries we'll talk about in a little bit, I can see the appeal. But to me, it doesn't seem that exciting, and it isn't that difficult to go full fire conversion Earthquake or full fire conversion Ground Slam, for example. Perforate. Perforate I actually really like. I already liked Perforate quite a lot as a skill. It's one of my favorite leveling skills. I don't play melee very much, but the one time I have played melee since the change, I used Perforate to level, and it felt really good. So now it provides flat fizz at all levels. The distribution of its spikes and blood stance to be made more consistent. I'll show you that later in the video. Our high percentage of its spikes should hit a small target, investment area, and all number of spikes should keep the percentage of spikes hitting consistent. If you didn't know, Perforate is a stance ability. It swaps based on sand or blood stance. When you're in sad stance, it shoots out a bunch of lines away from your character. It has better, more consistent clear than Earth Shatter. And then you swap into blood, and then you go and just melt. People already used to use Perforate just for like melting bosses. And now that the blood stance spikes will be more consistent for single target, should be really good. And they've also added more spikes to it, so it should have a smoother clear as well. So if we wait for that to come up in the video, I believe that comes up just after this. But you can see he just like one taps a rare. And yeah, I think Perforate, probably not two-hand, like dual-wield Impale Perforate. Here we go. Could be very strong. Use like bleed explosions. You can see he swaps here to blood stance and instantly kills the rare. I think he's using multi-strikes, so the next two hits are wasted, but look at that. really good with Impale. Really, really good with Impale. So I can see Perforate being good. Sunder rework is cool, and I like the Sunder rework. So the way that Sunder works now is it's much wider and longer, but it travels slower. Using Sunder with one cascade is still in motion, causes the existing cascade to end prematurely. It's got like a set minimum travel distance. So if you preferred the old Sunder playstyle, going for as much attack speed as possible, it will still be good. Like, it will still, like, work. But they're trying to make it have more of, like, an Earthquake attack, move. You can see it here. Huge, massive chunks. So it's very similar to Earthquake in playstyle. I don't know if it will clear better than Earthquake or do more damage than Earthquake, but it's nice to have options. Some people might prefer one, some people might prefer the other. So yeah, I dig it. And one thing which is very important, Ground Slam, Sunder, and Earthquake can all be used while unarmed. So everyone is screaming, oh my god, Facebreaker, this is going to be so busted. Facebreaker, OP, dude. Yes, Facebreaker is OP. I would expect all of these abilities to have their damage scaling changed. So I would expect a lot less flat fizz and a lot more like percent scaling. That would do a few things. So it would mean it'd still be good for Facebreaker, but it would make it more attractive on a two-handed weapon, because obviously the advantage of two-hands, they've got very good high base damage. So flat damage isn't as strong for two-hand. They want that big percent scaling. So yeah. Could be pretty good. I would also be much more likely to use a Facebreaker than a Hollow Palm. Hollow Palm would obviously always be really good. Hollow Palm already does absolutely ridiculous numbers. And this is the situation where if you prefer how these skills feel, then yeah. The other issue you might have with Hollow Palm is very starved for slots. So if you were going to go for a ability to use their maybe Vile Earthquake could be good, because that's like 2 buttons in one. You can just Vile Earthquake run around. But yeah, one of the main issues you have with Hollow Palm builds is fitting in like your attack, your Vile skill, your totem, then your Warcry now. So I definitely wouldn't try like Earth Shatter Hollow Palm. That'd be a big yikes in my opinion. Speaking of the one thing that could theoretically make Earth Shatter interesting though, if we jump to the end here, and sadly there isn't any gameplay of it. That's a bit loud. That's General's Cry. So General's Cry, we haven't seen gameplay, but they've just told us how it will work. This is a new Warcry that's been designed to be very open-ended in how it can be used. It's a skill/support hybrid, which melee attacks are linked to. This Warcry summons ghostly mirage archers from corpses near you. These ghosts use one of the linked skills once before dissipating. The number of warriors you summon is based on the total number of nearby enemies, as well as the power of nearby corpses. General's Cry lets you summon your own legion of warriors to destroy your enemies using a large selection of skills. So what you could maybe do is like General's Cry Earth Shatter, was it called? Yeah, Earth Shatter. And then just like instantly get an absolute shit ton of spikes. And then obviously when you General Cry, it will destroy your own spikes. There could maybe be some cool synergy there. One thing I'm actually very curious to try out, which I think could maybe be pretty interesting. So apparently General's Cry aren't coded as minions, they're coded as savior, so they're coded as you, which means potentially, theoretically, what you could do is have the Vigilant Jewel on your tree and have General Cry linked to Vigilant Strike, and maybe you could automate Fortify doing that. It needs to be tested. It might not work, but if it does work, that'd be very powerful. There are a lot of people who use like Vigilant Strike in a weapon swap on like bow builds. Dan does it a lot on like bleed builds. You do it a lot on like Caustic Arrow and stuff. And just making that feel a lot smoother is really nice, because it's much easier just having Fortify tied into a Warcry than having to have it on some crazy other thing. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all of that, though, the Warcries from the trailer footage seem to have about an 8-second cooldown. Now, none of these are linked to Second Wind. So, assuming it's an 8-second cooldown, if you link them to Second Wind, they'd go down to about a 6-second cooldown, and they'd have 2 charges. So, with assuming that Fortify, Vigilant Strike, General Cry interaction works, with 2 charges of it, you can have 100% uptime of Fortify quite easily on builds that previously would struggle to get Fortify. So it could be interesting. Could definitely be very interesting. Could also be a situation where you use it to like proc EE, curses, all sorts of funny things on like cast rebuilds. So it's got some general interesting application on non-attack builds, which I like. But getting into the other Warcries. So, Enduring Cry. Enduring Cry, I'm very excited to see the numbers on this. I use Enduring Cry a lot. A lot of my builds, I play dots, I play traps. It's very easy to just fit Warcries into them. So, could be interesting. But it still gives you endurance charges. But now it gives a short burst of very powerful healing. Enduring Cry does currently give you like a little heal over time. But the fact they say very powerful healing, to me at least, implies that they're buffing this healing number. So that could be very interesting. Could be very interesting. And it also gives you additional resistances and physical damage reduction for a short duration. So you're already getting damage reduction from the endurance charges, so you're getting a base 12% damage reduction. And then, you know, I'm going to guess it's at least 10%. I'd be surprised. I don't know. I think anything under 10 is kind of too low for them to bother adding it on. Anything over 10, I think, is broken. So if it's like 15, super strong. Anything over 10, amazing. But yeah, really strong. So this is very, very nice. Huge boon to dodge base builds. So yeah, this looks great. Intimidating Cry. Intimidating Cry previously came from, I want to say, the Feral Boots. And now it's just a skill gem that you can get. It intimidates enemies and it exerts. Exert is a new keyword. Whenever you Warcry, well, not some most Warcries, when you press them, you gain exertion. And it means your next few attacks deal double damage. Again, it doesn't say melee attacks, it just says attacks. So you could use this on wand builds, bow builds, basically any attack build, which isn't thingy. Curious to know how it would work with, say, for example, like Ellie hit totems. Could be interesting. Could also potentially be very strong on bleed builds, because it will like give you a massive initial hit on like your puncture, which if you're someone who played the Asylum bleed bow builds from last league, doubling that initial hit with the Raslatha's coil and everything, that could potentially give you some like really big juice on your bleed builds. So if this works on all attacks, which it doesn't say melee, this could be a really, really nice addition to those builds. So yeah. Ancestral Cry. This is a new Warcry which is designed to work well specifically with strike skills. It calls your next few strikes to also target nearby enemies, similar to the Ancestral Call support. This one I actually really dislike. I like all of them except for this one, and I'll explain why. So, we'll just wait until it swings around in here. We have seen the addition of Tribal Fury on the skill tree. How you can see it here now. So, they press the button. I'll move my camera up here. And you can see here it's got like charges. So, it's got 5 charges. The attack's 4, 3, 2. So, it's charge-based, not duration-based. So they are adding like additional strikes to the tree, so you don't need Anoint. So a base value, you don't have to use the Ancestral Support Gem. But because it's not duration based, because it's charge based, it's just kind of janky. You're still gonna need like additional strikes somewhere on your character because you can't get full sustain from this. And it's probably not gonna give you enough substantial clear to make a real difference. What I mean by that is I don't think getting one additional strike for your next 5 swings will change whether or not you kill a pack. It's like you'll kill the pack or you don't kill the pack. So with that in mind, I struggle to see the application where it will meaningfully increase either your single target or your AoE, considering you could just use a different Warcry which doubles your damage. It's like, do you want to use the Warcry that makes you hit another time, or do you just want to double your damage? I personally would rather just double your damage. Now, yes, Warcries don't share cooldowns, but the new key node they've shown, which makes them instant, makes them share cooldowns. So you could theoretically, like, juggle multiple Warcries. So it's like you do the Ancestral Warcry, then you do the Intimidate Warcry. So it's like you get the extra hit and you double your damage. But then you're just adding a lot of extra steps to your gameplay. Realistically, it's not something I would see you using much while clearing. Sure, if you were just, like, trying to go, like, full big dick on a boss, you can, like, pre-ramp a bunch of Warcries, maybe have Cluster Jewels to generate a bunch of rage, and then you just, like, attack the boss with, like, 8 different things up. Could be interesting, but I think it would have been a lot cooler if it was duration-based, because the other issue with it being charge-based and not duration-based, because it's charge-based, the more attack speed, the less uptime you have. Yes, there'll be a few, like, niche skills, stuff like Static Strike, where you don't attack very often, that it could be very strong, assuming the charges don't, like, fall off after a duration. But, yeah, I don't know. I just feel kind of iffy about it. Maybe with enchants or scale, it gives you so many additional strikes, they'll just become, like, absolutely ridiculous. But, yeah. It does provide some bonus armor scaling, which is one thing worth mentioning. So if it gives a large enough chunk of armor scaling, it could also be very nice to do something you just combo before, like, Molten Striking. But I don't know about this one. Not too sure about it. Seismic Cry. Seismic Cry causes your next few slam skills, which are all the abilities we went through here, to have increased AoE and more damage, which increases both each attack until you reset the Warcry, or your exerted attacks run out. So again, it's one of those things, if you're playing a slam skill, Ice Crash, Earthquake, Perforate, whatever, you'd probably use this just to get a little bit of extra damage. Yeah. Seems cool. The big thing that's going to be interesting with a lot of these builds is judging when you have enough damage and when you have enough clear. Because one big noob trap that a lot of people have with these builds is it's like they attack an extra time. You have this with dots as well. It's like when you first start playing dot builds, you'll attack once and you'll be like, oh, the mob isn't dead, I need to attack again. Whereas that first attack would have been enough that you could just keep running. I imagine with, like, some of the clear we've seen, like this Ice Crash clear is absolutely ridiculous. You don't need to, like, buff it up even more. I think with a lot of these attacks, you're probably actually not gonna need the AoE-based cries. And considering it's, like, 4 charges, 8-second cooldown, sure, 6-second cooldown with second wind and you get multiple stacks and stuff, I don't know. I think you're mostly just gonna focus on using them before a rare, using them before a boss, you know, because a lot of the time you're not gonna need it. So you're just gonna use it to, like, amp up your big attacks. So yeah. Could be cool. Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry has been completely reworked. A little bit sad about this. Rallying Cry used to be really nice on Might of a Matter builds. I was kind of hoping that there would still be some cool, like, non-melee focused utility cries. We have that with Enduring Cry. We have that with Infernal Cry, which we'll get to a bit. And we might have that with some interesting general cry setups that we mentioned earlier. But it's a bit of a shame to see the mana stuff gone. But anyway. So how does Rallying Cry work now? Causes nearby allies, not party members, this will work with minions, causes nearby allies to gain a buff that grants them a percentage of your main hand weapon damage based on the power of nearby enemies. It also exerts your next few attacks to deal more damage based on how many allies you have near you. Unlike most other Warcries, the power of the buff comes from both the power of it gives to both you. Sorry. The power of the buff comes from both the power of both nearby enemies and allies. So this screams something like, I don't know, dominating blow, maybe like a general cry minion thing, because those builds tend to have like some weapon damage built in. Using this on just like a generic summoner build, you generally don't have much damage on your main hand. Maybe with Animate Weapon or SRS or something where you've just got like a massive horde of minions out, even just adding a tiny bit of like flat damage will be enough. But yeah, it really does seem to scream more so to stuff like Herald of Purity, Domblow, stuff like that. Seems cool. Curious to see how like traditional support players could fit this in. Like if you're like just a aura bot kind of thing, how much you could leverage this. There might be some interesting gear choices that happens now. So I like it. It makes supports feel a bit more interesting, and it's got some very like direct niche application. Infernal Cry. So Infernal Cry was previously Abyssal Cry. I'm very excited for the new Infernal Cry. I will admit, when I first read this, I was pretty disappointed. Abyssal Cry is one of my favorite abilities. Abyssal Cry is very strong, or at least it used to be very strong. When they did the massive AoE rework, they completely gutted its AoE. Anyone who remembers Pox, an old build, which was a Blight Occultist using Abyssal Cry, I raced with Abyssal Cry quite a lot. It actually used to be very strong back when it had its old AoE, but anyway. It's gone now. It's over. Dead meme. We now have Infernal Cry. So, what Infernal Cry does, covers enemies in Ash. If you don't know, Ash slows enemies and makes them take 20% more damage. So, very strong. Very good for any fire-based caster. Really great for ignites. So, I'll be using a lot of this on my ignite builds and my burning damage builds. Obviously, really gives something like Righteous Fire. A debuff that scales the power of nearby enemies. This is the one bit of wording which worries me a little bit. So base Ash is 20% more, but now it apparently scales the power of the enemies. So they might have it so that Ash isn't always a guaranteed 20%. Because if 20% is the base value, then it scales more than that. That seems like it'd be too powerful. So I'm guessing it probably has like enemies take 5% at a minimum up to, I don't know, 30. Because enemies taking 20 increase as a base seems way too strong. Way too strong. So, yeah, I'm guessing they're going to, like, nerf it a little bit. Or maybe it'll be, only this application of it. But, yeah, it's weird. We need to see what the numbers... are. But if they keep the base of enemies take 20% and it scales, then that will be really broken. But anyway, we need to see the numbers. And it also causes enemies affected by this debuff to explode when slain. So not only are you getting this massive damage multiplier, and again, enemies take is effectively a more multiplier. There is diminishing returns based on what other multipliers you have, but it is a more multiplier. Yeah, so not only does it give you a huge chunk of damage scaling, gives you the support when you need it on res, it also gives you some extra map clear. So you can use this just for res, just for bosses for the damage, or you can just use this on cooldown while mapping for a little bit of extra clear. I would generally say hold it and just use it in specific scenarios rather than just pressing it on cooldown. I would realistically only press it on bosses when you need a single target, or when you're like completely surrounded in like a Blight or a Breach encounter or like Legion or something. I wouldn't really be just like slamming it on cooldown. Obviously, if you've got like instant Warcries, go for it. I feel like with the power of a lot of these abilities, though, you kind of don't want instant Warcries. My thought process there is Second Wind. So Second Wind lowers the cooldown and gives you a second charge. A lot of the time, I would rather have a second charge than have it be instant. Yes, if it's not instant, you can't just have it on left click. You've got to actually manually press it, which is one thing I like. I was using a lot of the instant Warcries on left click last league. But from the way they're balancing them now, yes, that is a way to play it. But generally, the power of these Warcries is so strong, they want you to actually, like, press buttons. So that, I think, is pretty cool. I think that's pretty interesting. Quickly, on that note, please, GGG, make Withering Step not an instant ability. Give it a small cast time. Withering Step would be so much better if it had a second charge. Like, I think Withering Step is a very good skill to use as an example. So if you don't know, Withering Step, it gives you the elusive effect, and it applies Wither on enemies. So generally, I use it as like a debuff kind of effect. What I would really like to do with that ability is to double tap it to instantly apply max Wither stacks to enemies. But I can't. I can only press it once, so I only apply half effectiveness. So with something like the double damage thing, you want to like press the double damage, use your attacks, then instantly press it again. Well, not, but quickly press it again, rather not instantly. So that was a bit confusing language. One thing I'm also curious is if I have Exert, right? If I like double tap a Warcry, will the charges, like the remaining charges, stack up? Or will it be a situation where like you can only have 4 charges, and then if you press it again, it goes back to 4? If you can stack them up, then Second Wind will be very, very strong. Especially if it's a situation where you're like juggling multiple Warcries that give you shenanigans. I guess if it's like, if it doesn't have a cap, you could maybe like cheese before boss encounters, where you just like spam a bunch of Warcries right before the fight and you go in with like 50 charges. So maybe they have to have like a cap on the amount of charges you can possibly have. But these are all things that we won't know until we can play it. But yes, to summarize my thought process on the slams and the Warcries, standout winners, the ones I'm most excited for from the slam abilities. Perforate has always been a really good leveling skill. I'm excited for Perforate to be a lot better, but I think it'll be pretty slept on. Ground Slam is already pretty good, and the Ground Slam AoE was looking extra thick, as is Ice Crash. Ground Slam and Ice Crash will just be solid. Earthquake is always amazing. Vaal Earthquake especially is super satisfying. Vaal Earthquake Facebreaker running around will feel absolutely beautiful. Tectonic Slam, I can miss it, to be honest. Earth Shatter, I can miss it, to be honest. And then for the Warcries, Infernal Cry will be great. And General Cry might have some interesting interactions. As we said, maybe doing some like 4 to 5 Vigilant Strike memeing. Enduring Cry could be very strong as well, based on how much mitigation it provides and how much healing it provides. But anyway, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Let me know what slam and cry skill you're most excited for. By the way, Consecrated Path is a good skill, but not that exciting. I don't know. Bye-bye.